The following episode of FOFOP is classified MA. It contains some coarse language, some nudity, drug references, a sex scene, time travel, terrible Batman impersonations, a Charlie Clausen, pronounced Clausen-shaped hole, and mild coarse language. FOFOP advises that the program is not suitable for persons under the age of 15, and minors must be accompanied by an adult guardian or priest. This is John Deek speaking.
I'm just going to record this bit even though we haven't started yet. This is just a mic check. But as I explain the podcast to you, because sometimes there are new listeners, there will be people who've tuned in.
I like a mic check with a story.
Right, exactly. So the idea, this podcast is called FOFOP, F-O-F-O-P, FOFOP, right? Now, that's because it's a spin-off of a podcast called TOFOP, T-O-F-O-P. Now, that's the podcast that my friend Charlie and I have been doing for nearly 8 years now, right? And we started it out together just as this bit of nonsense. It's called TOFOP. It's a stupid joke about Russell Crowe's band. Russell Crowe has a band called 30 Odd Foot of Grunts.
Right.
And they were called TOFOG. And I was obsessed with his music career. And so the little joke was that we were naming our podcast after Russell Crowe's band. And the greatest moment in the history of the podcast was when on Google search, now if you put in T-O-F-O, it comes up first our podcast and then second his band, right? So anyway, he had to stop doing the podcast, right? It's a long story. He had to stop doing
because Russell Crowe had threatened him.
He had to stop doing the podcast because he was on a very family-friendly Australian TV show called Home and Away.
Wow.
And so at the start, they didn't really understand what podcasting was, and they thought, we were having conversations about things that perhaps weren't family-friendly. So they asked if he could not do the podcast for a while. So then I span off this podcast, FOFOP, where I would have guest Charlies. So everyone who sits in that seat is technically a guest Charlie, which was what I tried to explain to you in a really short way and then realized it makes even less sense.
I like it. I appreciate that you think so highly of me that you would take the time to explain that. So you're not worried about the consequences of Australian morality outrage by the things you say? Your friend stepped down from the podcast, right?
I mean, I did think...
Aren't you worried about your career?
I did think at the time that it was weird that my manager hadn't given me a call. You know what I mean? Like, I host a very popular show on the national broadcast of the ABC, and yet apparently the nonsense that comes out of my mouth on this podcast is to be expected of me. So, yeah, I think this is I don't think anybody's shocked.
Somebody's got a golden ticket.
Wow, I don't know. I don't know if I can abuse it. I'm sure there are things I could say on this podcast that would get me into trouble, but... in a general sense, the things that I would say that would get me into trouble have already been said, and people have already made their peace with whether they enjoy my things or not, and they've just moved on one way or the other, it seems. Anyway, let's start the podcast. It all sounds good. Hello and welcome to FOFOP. I'm Wil Anderson, and joining me, guest Charlie Clausen for the very first time, but it's an absolute pleasure to have him here. He's at my house. We're in Sydney. The sun has come out. The dogs are sitting on the mat behind us. It is Tom Rhodes. Hello, Tom.
Hey, Will. I'm glad we finally got to do this.
I know. We've been talking about doing it, but in LA.
Yeah, we've tried for a long time to coordinate podcast recording. But envy is the primary source of unhappiness, and I'm going to try not to be envious of the magnificent little beach bungalow that you have.
Well, I appreciate that. It's very nice of you to say. I work from home, so it's not. This is all I have. I don't have like an office I go to or anything that's more exciting. This is pretty much just a transition from the house to the little shed out the back of the house. That's my whole world.
I love it. I mean, I'm staying in the inner city, and this is what you expect to see when you come to Australia. Somebody lives by the water. Right.
Okay. Nice one. Are you enjoying the inner city of Sydney though? Because you're out doing shows in Australia. Are you just doing Sydney? Are you just at the Sydney Comedy Store?
I'm just doing the store. I'm doing an hour solo show September 2nd, and then this Sydney festival tour, which has been at the Comedy Store, and then I'm doing Wollongong.
Okay. The Gong?
Did
They're good audiences
did
in
I
The
pronounce
Gong.
it correctly?
That was pretty good, actually, to
Okay.
be honest. What the people...
I actually went up on my toes when I pronounced that.
Well,
so I
that's the
wouldn't
thing
make a
that the
mistake.
people at home did not get.
Wollongong.
Yeah, it was like I guess a back stretching exercise. That's what it looked like. A yoga pose. Imagine if you'd gone to yoga and they're going, and it's time for us to do the Wollongong. And because it's like one of those words, it's a little onomatopoeic. It sounds like what it is. It felt like you were elongating your body because the word Wollongong itself elongates.
And it sounds like one of the poses I could do properly.
Right, yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, I like that. So you're going on this tour. You're going to the Gong.
Just next weekend. The last week I'm here.
Okay.
Wollongong, Newcastle.
Tell me this. So you're out here at the moment. So you're doing your hour, which I highly recommend people go and see. If I am in town, I'm definitely going to come along on Saturday night.
If Will likes me, I must be funny.
Yeah, exactly, right? That's basically that's what I was doing, Tom. That was my little endorsement right up the top. Get to the show details early in case they, switch off before the end.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, so, but the other nights you do these, amazing sort of lineup shows they have there at the store. This is the way they've been running their shows around the Sydney Comedy Store, which is kind of a showcase of the best of, young and emerging, Sydney comedy with some experienced people, some internationals, some, drop-ins, It's a real good mix if you go out for a night of comedy there. Plus, people doing these hour-long shows sort of around it. Tell me about... like doing those lineup shows, because when you a comedian of your experience, when you go out on the road, often you're doing your set every night, like whether it be
you're headlining and
right.
you're not working with a large variety,
right? And you do, you're probably there. You might have like two other people on the bill, like in a general sort of sense. You might have a host, you might have like someone who's going to like feature for you, but that's essentially your whole crew. And then suddenly you're dropped in with like 12 people who all kind of know each other probably as well, or know each other a little bit more than you know them. Like, what's that like? I'm just interested in the skill of being a comedian that is beyond the actual bit you get to do on stage, which is the changing circumstance of your job. How are you in those situations?
I like it. I love comedy. It's my favorite topic and activity in the world, and I like seeing different styles of comedy. There was some great local acts that were on the show. Everybody's doing 15 minutes, and the store has been packed. I think I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass, but playing in Sydney is one of my favorite audiences.
Sydney Comedy Store is a great comedy room.
I think one of the best comedy clubs in the world, and that's why I
sometimes those rooms just have like a magic that you can't explain. Because if you were going to design it, it's not perfectly designed. Like, there's still bits of it that you would ideally change, but for whatever reason, there's something about that room, particularly when it's full, that
the oval stage, the height of it, the red curtain, and then in the back part, it's tiered seating, so like everywhere is a great seat. And you're right, it's not like the perfectly designed room, but I love it. And then also what you're saying about working with different comedians, I'm in Los Angeles now. I'm on the road half the time, and then half the time I'm in LA doing sets at the Comedy Store and the Improv. And it's like that. There's a ton of comedians. Everybody's doing 15-minute sets. And then I also go to New York City twice a year to do sets at the Comedy Cellar and the Underground, and that's everybody doing 15-minute sets. And as you know, in London, it's the same. Those kind of, there was one act that was a complete flop over the weekend. There's a couple of younger comedians, great character people. You could see they're just starting to write their comedic voices, and they had really strong jokes as it is. I mean, so like for me, man, and there was a couple...
By the way, I think it's undervalued as long as the flop doesn't ruin the night.
Exactly.
How it's undervalued how good a flop can be for the rest of the night.
Yeah.
Because essentially what it is, it's essentially somebody falling off the high wire before you go on to do your high wire.
Yeah.
Like there's a sense of going, oh yeah, this is dangerous. I remember this isn't that easy to do. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like it should almost be necessary for every night. If you're programming your night perfectly, you'd be like, look, to be honest, it's unfair to them and they'll appreciate the stage time. But we've put them in we'll put them in the flop spot, the perfect flop spot, just to remind everybody that this is as hard as some of these guys are making it look too easy.
I like it. And then also there's there's an art to doing a short set. Like when you do a television set, you're doing like 7 to 10 minutes, and they're going to chop it down to 5, or sometimes you only get 5, and you got to hit it perfectly like an Olympic dive.
So I'm interested in that because you say you are interested in comedy and you love comedy. So it might be something that you have like a nice insight into, which is this idea of in 5 minutes, what are you trying to achieve? Like if someone says to you, hey, we want you to come on Conan or whatever, or, do this gala spot or whatever it is, but it has to be 5 minutes. What's your approach to doing 5 minutes as opposed to doing like, a headline set?
Well, I mean, of course, you're just going to try and hit them with as many jokes as you can. I mean, that's or like the greatest story, 5 minutes is nothing. But like when you're talking about the 15-minute set, like when you do, Montreal, the gala or these other festivals, and it's always at the gala, you do like 15 minutes. And that is like, I think, a perfect amount of time to showcase your best jokes, cut all the fat off the pork chop, hit them with your best story, whatever. Like you can really build a nice crescendo in a 15-minute set.
I would absolutely agree with you, which is that opportunity in 15 minutes is enough to introduce yourself fully to a crowd if you do it properly. Tell them everything that they need to know about you to go away and have like a fully formed opinion of you. In 5 minutes, you can give them an aspect of your personality or who you are or your thoughts, but you can't give them 15. You probably should be able to give them enough of an indication about what the rest of the 45 minutes would be if they came and saw you for an hour, So what is it in that 15 minutes that you would like an audience to take away from you? Like if they're seeing you for the first time, what are you trying to get across in 15 minutes so that they walk away and go, well, this is what I think of Tom Rhodes? Sorry, we don't always talk about comedy.
Well, I mean,
I'm
trying to do my not only the funniest jokes, the smartest jokes.
Right. Okay.
And then also a personal flavor of like Bill Hicks used to say about Jerry Seinfeld. Well, he's funny, but you don't learn anything about him.
Right.
It's just all these jokes, and I don't do a big personal bloodletting on stage. I don't like that either. Like the Edinburgh show where someone cries every night exactly at 28 minutes and 30 seconds.
Right.
And
it's a hard
you got to recreate
business
that.
model. It's hard to have one of those things happen to you every year. You might have one in you, but it's like coming home at Christmas and trying to get dad drunk so he'll touch you funny, so you can cry at the 28-minute mark.
Edinburgh show.
I need it for Edinburgh, Dad. Do one thing for my comedy career.
Yeah. I did Edinburgh a couple years ago, and I called my uncle immediately and said, had you fucked me, I would have had a better shot at the best show title.
At least got on the list. At least would have got on a list. Well, that's the thing these days, though, as well, with that style of, comedy I've noticed is, like, in the past, there was at least an aspect of, and by the way, I've seen people write powerful shows around, those sort of themes. It only becomes a cliche because there are now so many people doing comedy that everybody feels like they have to have one of those sort of shows. And then sometimes people don't have a story that really matches it with the other stories. Yeah. It's like, oh, my dog died and I really like my dog. And you're like, yeah.
Well,
cool, man.
I don't like sloppy comedy. Right. If I like well-written comedy, and like if you're doing a 15-minute set, like you should show the best that you have to offer. Even on like Edinburgh hour shows or any kind of show, I like to be dazzled by a little wit. I like to be as impressed with someone's intelligence of what they can, articulate in a humorous way.
So who was it that inspired you to be a comedian like that? Like, who was it that you were fascinated by that was like, oh, I these are the things that thrill me when I watch them, or when I want to be a comedian, these are the things I would like to be able to do?
Well, where I'm starting from, my father is the reason I'm a comedian. My dad loved stand-up comedy, and Richard Pryor was his favorite.
Really?
So my dad had tons of Pryor vinyl records, and then he also had Bob Newhart. He was a big fan of Bob Newhart. And I remember driving around with my dad as a kid listening to Pryor like cassette tapes. And so that's where I'm starting from. And Pryor's my all-time favorite. And then when I was real young, starting out in Florida, I worked with Bill Hicks, and then I moved to San Francisco on my spiritual comedy quest. And I've always thought that San Francisco is the Jerusalem of stand-up comedy. I think it started. Mark Twain invented the stand-up comedy art form. He gave lectures. The first one was like 1856, something like that, in San Francisco. And they were humorous. He worked on these lectures like a comedian. He'd drop lines that weren't funny. The guy, I think invented stand-up comedy there. So
I like the idea that maybe he was doing some open mics on the way to those gigs as well before he got him in front of the big
the
crowds.
Saloon.
Yeah, you go, Samuel Clements is doing a gig, wink, later on tonight. Always under his usual working name, just while he's trying it out.
Okay, if we could get the piano player to stop playing some ragtime for a second, and if we could get those drunk prostitutes at the pool table to simmer down just a little bit, we're going to have some comedic entertainment by Samuel Clements. Okay. We'll wait till the guy with the peg leg makes his way across the wooden floor before we start. So I started out with high standards, and then I've, through the years, the comedy world is very small. So like doing festivals, and you do it for any number of years. I mean, everybody pretty much knows each other. I'm friends with Dave Chappelle and Louis C.K. and Bill Burr and Doug Stanhope and all these, brilliant comedians that I see and get to hang out with. And so it's like, so not only, I always have that. That's really like in America now is the golden age of comedy. There's such a resurgence, and there's just the best of American comedians I'm working with in New York and L.A. and doing these like 15-minute sets and seeing how they do it. Can I regale you with a story about Amy Schumer? I was in New York in June. I went there for a week.
Yeah,
and it was great. Some friends of ours own a place right on Bowery, so it's like really. It's right next to Little Italy, and then there's Greenwich Village. So it was a short walk. My wife and I would eat like these great restaurants that she yelped, and then we'd stroll over to the club. And the thing at those shows, like if somebody famous comes in and they want to go on, they go on immediately.
Right.
And you get bumped. So twice I got bumped for Amy Schumer. She told this story about her dad. She closed her set with saying, my dad has MS. Her dad has one of the terrible muscle disease, and he's wheelchair bound. I think it's MS. And he said that he's a real mean person. He's kind of an asshole, but she's got a lot of money now, and she wants to do something nice for her dad because she loves him. So she has been paying someone to jack off her father. And she's like, do you guys think that's wrong? And then like half the audience is like, no, not at all, And they it's New York. They adore Amy Schumer. So like I had to go on after her. And I improvised this great opening. I would walk out all sheepish and I'd say, hi everybody. Forgive me, I'm a little nervous. This isn't my real job. My real job is I jack off Amy Schumer's father.
Right.
And
Brilliant.
I'm not used to working under these bright lights. Usually I worked at candlelight with a little soft Sinatra in the background. So it was great.
So tell me this. You talked about like, being in San Francisco and the sort of spiritual connection between sort of like, comedy and what... I mean, it's an interesting thing, comedy, to do as a job. I think about this a lot. And one of the things that comes with being a comedian is if you allow yourself, you can constantly be in your own head. Like you've signed up to a job where you have given yourself the capacity to every day wake up and examine your life and examine the circumstance around you and examine what you believe about the world and like soak up what other people believe about the world and try to filter that into like, you know, a way of connecting with a whole bunch of complete strangers in a room. It can be a great thing to sign your life to. Like it can be about what comedy can teach you about life and as a coping mechanism and all those sort of things. But it can also be that sort of thing of going, you know, the comedic angle on this is when something terrible is happening, I sometimes wonder if I'm connecting with it in the way that I should be, because I'm actually connecting with it in the way of going, this will make great material. You know, that you process your entire life through the prism of what it means to be a stand-up comedian. So I guess the question I'm asking you is, how connected are those two things to you? Like the journey of what comedy can teach you about who it is to be human, or is that something that is separate, you know, to the work? Do you separate those two? How does that work? Do you understand the question I'm asking you?
Well, it's a two-tiered question, so I'll give you a two-tiered answer. Good. I think the thing about staying in your head is a good thing. It can be taxing, yes, of course, and my wife is a great coach about pushing me to, you know, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about that? And like to write essays. We both feel that like writing little mini essays is the path to writing great material.
Okay.
And the you know, my uncle used to deliver packages for Federal Express, and he would always say to me, you know, Tom, just remember, when I show up at an office building to deliver a package, no one applauds. You know, like in comedy, and we get applaud before we start.
Before you start.
We walk up, we go to work to a round of applause.
Before you start your 40,
so, I mean,
you start your 40-minute job.
Yeah, exactly. And like I now that I'm older, I wake up earlier, but I've slept till noon for like 30 years of my life.
But my favorite one on that one is if I come home after a terrible show. And by the way, most terrible shows are shows that I believe are terrible by my standards, rather than the audience having walked away thinking we're terrible. But I come home in one of those moods, like, you know, tonight didn't work because this, you know, kicking, blah, blah, blah. And Amy's big one is always, how long did it go for? And I was like, 45 minutes. She's like, yeah. And then it was over. So, you know, like even your worst day at work is over within the hour normally. That's the good thing about comedy as a job.
Well, and so the good thing about that perpetual voice in your head where you're looking for things is, you know, I always think, especially as a stand-up comedian, you have to be your own best corner man.
Okay.
Like Muhammad Ali had Bundini Brown in his corner. He was the guy who came up with the float like a butterfly, sting like a bee poem. And so he was the guy in Ali's corner. Don't give up, champ. Keep sticking, you know, stay off the ropes, get in the inside. You bob your head and stick and throw and punch and uppercut. And, you know, you have to do that yourself as a comedian. You're on stage and it's like, okay, this, you know, that new bit really shit the bed and I got to, you know, stay off the ropes, you know, and then in life as a comedian, you got to keep coaching yourself back from the brink. It's the never-ending thing about comedy. And what I always say about show business in general is it's never possible to feel good about yourself for longer than 3 minutes at a time. So you can have like the greatest achievement, and then like 3 minutes later, you get an email from your manager, or a club canceled, or something that you just feel like, that's right, I'm a piece of shit again. So no matter how great you feel about yourself, there's always something that's going to come and knock it off 3 minutes later or less. So I think there's that good aspect for me about, you know, where you're, and I like you not being lazy and trying to, like, now I'm trying to come up with my new hour. I just put out a new album called All Hail Laughter. And
available at all places that you buy albums, or do you have to go to your website?
How do people or my website, tomrhodes.net. But it's on, you can buy it there, or Amazon. And I mean, and I'm trying to film a special. I did a Netflix special a few years ago. It ran for 3 years. It just came down. But so it's time for me to do like another special.
Okay, so tell me then, if you're about to like embark on that idea of going, at the end of this is what I want. I want this new show that's going to be this special, and yeah, I put this together. How does that process work for you? Where do you start, putting something like that together? Do you think about what it's going to be as a whole piece before you start, or do you just start chipping away on ideas or little things that you have? How does that process start?
For the next special, I have an idea about doing something internationally. So I'm going to pitch that to Netflix and Comedy Central when I go back to Los Angeles. So
Okay.
Yeah.
So you got like a theme. You've
I
got
got
an
a-
idea.
I got an
like
idea.
a thing that
Yeah.
it would be.
I got an idea. But then this new album I just put out, it's a double album. I recorded in Minneapolis last year. It was right after the Orlando Pulse nightclub shooting had happened.
Yeah.
And I'm from Orlando, so I got a nice gun hunk on there. And then also, it was right after Prince died. And
Right.
Prince was from Minneapolis. I recorded it in Minneapolis.
Where did you
it
record
was
it
a
in
lifelong
Minneapolis?
Prince
Did you record
fan.
it at Acme or somewhere
At
else?
Acme, yeah.
At Acme. That's a beautiful
And
comedy room.
in 1995, Prince's keyboard player was a fan of mine, invited me to Paisley Park for a private party where Prince jammed from like 3 in the morning until 6 a.m. There were only 50 people there. It was like incredible. So anyway, I talked about this and on that. So also,
that's
so
pretty
that
great.
show was before Trump. I had recorded stuff about the election on that one, and then the next one I did in San Francisco in February, and it was right after Trump was elected. So like there's and then there's personal.
Okay, so tell me this. I'm fascinated by Prince. For whatever reason, where I grew up, I got the wrong idea about what Prince was when I was a kid. Like in our area, Prince was it was on the commercial pop stations, and it got mixed in with if you were into commercial pop music, like that. Prince was kind of like that. And so I, for whatever reason in my head, just got into my head that Prince wasn't the sort of music that I was into. I was in LA when he did 20 shows in 20 nights at the Forum.
Yeah.
And so I'm living in LA, and I go and see Paul F. Tompkins. Do you know Paul F. Tompkins?
Yeah.
I see him at Largo doing a show one night, and he talks about in his show that he's just gone and seen Prince. And from his description, from this like 10-minute comedy routine that he did that night, I was like, whatever the fuck it costs me, I'm going to get a ticket to go and see Prince, right? So I go and pay whatever it is that I paid for this ticket. One ticket by myself, and just went, I'm just going to go. I don't need to go with someone else. Like, because I'm kind of, in some ways, I'm an explorer. I've never really, of course, as it turns out, one of the revelations of the night was I know every song Prince has ever released, because even if you're not a Prince fan, Prince songs have been everywhere enough that there wasn't anything the whole night where I was like, what's this song? But secondly, I'm so glad I went by myself, because it was spiritual. It's like one of the greatest concerts I've ever been to, easily top 5 concerts I've ever been to in my entire fucking life. I've never been more entertained by one person. Like the fact that he had 20,000 people just in the palm of his hand in the round. So you just have a piano on one side. So you like just go over there sometimes, do the piano ones. At one stage, this is when I was like, went from going, yeah, okay, this will be interesting too. Oh my God, this guy's the greatest entertainer. Well, these were the 2 moments that just got me where I just went, oh, I get this now. So at the start, he's playing on the big Jumbotron screens, James Brown. Like, it turns out that a whole bunch of James Brown's musicians play in Prince's band as well. But I didn't know that at the time. No one was explaining to me. So he's playing James Brown, like, in concert up on the screen. And I'm just like, the balls on this motherfucker. Like, that's like me playing a Bill Hicks, like, live album before I come out on stage. You know what I mean? Like... But then there's this interview in the James Brown thing where they're interviewing James Brown, and James Brown on the big screen in close up just says, people always say, why don't you play the best of James Brown? And James Brown just looks down the camera and goes, because the best of James Brown is yet to come. And the lights go out and Prince just comes out from the middle of the stage.
Wow.
And I went, oh my God. All right. Okay.
This is going to be a show.
Right? And then at one stage he's over on the piano and he's like playing like the riff from Cream, and then he'll play the riff from something else, and then in between he'll just go, too many hits, and then just like move on. It was amazing. So you went to Paisley Park is my question.
Yeah, and I saw Prince 4 times.
Right.
I was in the 10th grade when Purple Rain came out. I saw Prince in 1984 on the Purple Rain tour. And then Purple Rain was like such a ubiquitous part of my puberty and, losing my virginity. That's why, I figured out, like, it's why I like In Excess so much. I was like, all my earliest sexual experiences were like to Prince and In Excess and things like just Prince. I've been a fan since Purple Rain. I saw him 4 times, and his keyboard player Tommy, who had invited me to Paisley Park, I got there early on Saturday night.
Right.
So I brought one of the other comedians that was working with me. The guy still thanks me profusely to this day. The other comedian that was on the show lived in Minneapolis and thought, "Oh, I'll do this anytime." And whenever I see that, I saw that guy after Prince died, and he's like, "Oh man, I really should have gone with you that night, man." So this was his keyboard player,
right,
for Prince, and he was a fan of mine. Yeah. I had done a bunch of stuff on Comedy Central, and the guy was a huge Comedy Central fan, and and it was one of those kind of tours. So he could get there early, which was like 1 a.m,
right,
perfectly after my show ended like at midnight, and buzz out there to where he lived, and he gives me this private tour. In the basement, there was it was like a purple BMW, and there was the motorcycle from Purple Rain, which was like kind of medium size. It looked bigger on film, It was like a special made motorcycle, but like, oh my God, that's from the thing, And I saw.
I like to think the whole house would have been like that. That would have been even better.
Miniature.
You go
everything in miniature.
Everything.
Yeah. Well, before that show started, he walked right in front of me, and he was like 5'3".
Right.
He was tiny.
I mean, even in his heels on stage, you could tell he was tiny, but he filled a 20,000 seat theater when I saw him.
There was I rode on the elevator that he died on.
Wow.
And then upstairs there was a sewing shop with like 6 sewing machines and this absolute beautiful rolls of fabrics,
right,
and like Chanel looking designs on sketch paper pinned on walls and cork boards. And so he actively had a designer there, or he was designing things himself. All of his clothes were made. So like when I first started taking trips to Hong Kong, I started having like really pimp suits made, and I got that idea from Prince. And let me just tell you, because I know you'd be impressed, that I opened for James Brown.
Well, of course I'd be impressed by that. So tell me the circumstances of this. Where was it? How did it happen? Because this a thing that's not very... It happens here occasionally in Australia, having a comedian open for a musical act. But like a lot of the time it's when...
It's very common in the States,
right,
and then they don't have to set up a band doesn't have to, you don't have to move another band's equipment.
Right.
And all you got to do is, turn on the microphone.
You don't have to pay a whole other band.
You don't have to pay them either.
You don't have to travel with a whole other band. You don't have to feed a whole other band backstage.
Yeah.
You don't have to get drinks for a whole other band. There's a lot of advantages. I can see it.
Yeah.
So you're opening for James Brown where?
1996 at the Canocti Harbor Resort, which is 2 hours north of San Francisco on Clear Lake. Absolutely beautiful. And... I had to do 20 minutes in front of him. I'm from the South. I love James Brown. Grew up with. I started out on the Southern circuits, and I remember I did a shitty one-nighter in Augusta, Georgia, when James Brown was in prison. And I rode my car out to the edge of the prison, and I sat on the hood. I had my James Brown Greatest Hits cassette tape in the, turned up in the car. I'm sitting on the hood smoking cigarettes, just brooding. They're got this genius locked up over there like an animal, just brooding and getting angry at government and the, racist justice system in America. And just I know facts about James Brown. He did all of his earliest recordings in Cincinnati, Ohio. I read his autobiography. This man means so much to me. So I didn't want to meet him.
Right, because because if you know things about James Brown, you might know that have enough sense to go, well, maybe this meeting won't go in the way that will enhance my love of James Brown.
Exactly,
right?
and I wanted to keep the. I mean, he was in his 60s at the time. His show was still phenomenal. He still did splits and stuff, and the guy is electrifying. Even as a senior citizen, he was a brilliant performer.
Is it true?
But I was worried. I didn't want to ruin my hero image. I didn't want to go backstage and what if he's in his underwear? He's got his wig on a hanger. Who knows what the scenario? My hero.
He's just looking.
I accidentally see through his pee hole on his boxer shorts. Something weird. Anyway, now
just staring into a mirror, just saying over and over. The truth is, I don't feel good. I don't feel good. I don't.
I'm kind of melancholy today, to be quite honest.
Right, to be honest.
To be frank.
Yeah, but nobody wants to hear that from me, do they?
I'm feeling so-so.
Can't feel good every day.
I feel so-so.
How can you feel good every day?
Song wouldn't have had as much power if it would have been I'm feeling so-ho. So-so.
You know, the truth was when I said I couldn't go on, I could go on. I was just faking it tonight. I could go on. So what happens in that situation on the night? Because this is the thing that I always think as the comedian in me. This is what I think is do these James Brown fans listen to you? Are they... Because, I guess they're more familiar with the idea that a comedian might open for an act like this. So
and then also is Northern California where people are really chilled
cool.
really cool.
Right. So
and
they're
really
just happy that something's on.
About everything.
Right.
It's hard to anger these people.
Okay.
Unless you some right-wing hate group was going to do a march in San Francisco a few days ago, and they canceled it because the people in San Francisco said they were going to throw dog turds at them. So, we saw in Charlottesville, the clashes between the anti-fascists and the Nazi fascist people, and that didn't settle anything. So you can't confront violence with violence. You have to confront hate with little tiny dog
turds. Well, also, at least you know where all the dog turds are. You're not going to randomly step in a dog turd.
Yeah.
It's probably going to encourage people to pick up their dog turds in the meantime.
So they have some ammunition.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's probably cleaning up the city a little as well, I would think.
Yeah, there could be eco little turd carrier ammunition bags.
I did read there was some place, which I can't remember, online that they had a Nazi march through their town, and their way of combating that was they
blasted them and clapped.
Well, they signed them up to a...
Oh, that's right.
They did a walkathon.
Yeah.
And they raised all this money and
Yeah.
then sent it to anti-Nazi causes. So that was pretty good. So every beat they marched, essentially, they were raising money for causes that did not support them, which was fun.
I saw that. I think that was actually in Germany.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they have to be a bit more creative about it now, don't they? They have to lean in a little harder.
Yeah.
I would think, I guess if you're in Germany now, you're I guess this is heat off us a bit now, right?
Well, yeah. Who would have thought that now Germany is one of the most progressive countries in Europe and a very compassionate leader in Angela Merkel, and the United States is the leading hostility.
I'm interested in your perspective because you've traveled a lot. You're a world traveler in your comedy, but you've also lived in a whole bunch of different places. Do you have any thoughts about what system, what's the things that you've seen in one place that you can't believe they don't have in other places? Do you know what I mean? Do you have those things where you go to one place and then you go, why doesn't everybody else have this thing?
Well, yeah, I lived in Amsterdam for 5
Right.
years, and I adore the Dutch. It's you can't call them a socialist country because in reality they are a socialist democracy with a functioning monarchy.
Right.
So the king actually has say and input on the government.
Right.
And it's socialist, but it's also a democracy. The fact that they have health care and people can get quality educations for not having to pay exorbitant money for it. My wife is from Rotterdam, not from a wealthy family, and she attended Leiden University, which is the Harvard of the Netherlands. and she didn't have a crippling student debt for the rest of her life. You know, like in America, I remember my sister's student debt she had. I mean, there's so many people in the States. You know, you start out in the hole.
Right. And
carrying
the
some-
best and the brightest.
Yeah.
Like if the idea of the society, if the idea of the reason to have university is that we vaguely agree, which I'm not sure that we do vaguely agree on this anymore, but let's just say that we used to vaguely agree that it was in everybody's benefit that we were all smarter, right? I don't think you could actually get an agreement on that. But in the old days, that used to be the idea,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Well,
I thought that's what we were aiming for too. Yeah, less poverty, better way of life, extended life expectancy years.
Yeah,
and
and
now it's like, I mean, and I'll tell you, Australia still remains very charming to me, but like I lost the point.
No, tell me. I bet you're about to say that something's changed in Australia from when you first came here to coming here now. Do you think so?
Oh, no. That's what I was going to say, is that in America, smart is the new stupid.
Right.
I mean, I don't think it's new. I think it's been trending this way for a while, but it appears to be the dumber you are, the better you serve capitalism. And you don't question things. You lose your factory job, your tech job, or whatever. Now it's like, I don't know what the fuck has happened in America.
Well, it's
that was the point I was going to make.
No, well, I think that's right. Like, I mean, I look at the news media. I studied journalism at university, and like, I just look at that industry from what it was to what it is now. Like, I click on the front page of these news websites some days, and I just don't see any news or anything. Like, I mean, the news.com.au, which is the big, Rupert Murdoch, what mainstream Australia would probably click on to find out what the news is. Like, most of it's Game of Thrones fucking recaps.
Yeah, well,
you won't believe this outrageous Game of Thrones theory. And that's like the number 2 story. And the number 1 one is about some dwarf that fell down a hole, but their breast implants stopped them from falling the whole way down or something. That's the number 1 click story. Then the Game of Thrones recaps are 2 through 9. And then you might actually get to some politics or news. It's like we decided as a world when it came to news that every restaurant in the world should be McDonald's. Like, there's no problem with having that trash stuff, but did we have a discussion about it all being trash? But the idea is that more of us consume the trash than consume the good stuff. So I guess that's the argument that would be made back in the other direction.
Yeah.
That this is what we want.
Well, I think Australia, for me, remains charming because, like, you guys are about to vote on marriage equality. And to me, it's just like it's like I feel nostalgic being here because I remember when we were in that place in America and like, really, Australia, it's what who's left? You, Afghanistan?
I mean,
who doesn't have what civilized country doesn't have gay marriage? So it's so funny to like see this like, oh, that's still an issue here.
Yeah.
And that people are making the same arguments that they made in the States. Like,
well, that's the
what's next? People going to marry their dogs, but people going to marry their toasters. Like, this is the exact same shit people said in America, and it's so funny. No one's going to marry their fucking dog or their toaster. We're talking about human beings.
Well, first,
and every
okay.
human being experiences love and should have basic human rights to, so it's charming.
Firstly, nobody's marrying their dog, right? Okay, firstly, we all know that. Nobody's marrying their dog. Secondly, like, that's not what consent is anyway. A dog can't consent to being married. So you're talking about a whole completely different thing. It's like, it's a stupid argument. But even if it wasn't a stupid argument, this is the thing that amazes me about all the arguments, whether it's like they'll do this or any of the slippery slope arguments that they trot out is, it's like they're ignoring the rest of the world, like pretending the rest of the world doesn't exist. You go, no, you can prove no one's going to marry a dog because they've had it in place for 15 years.
That's a great
and
point.
No one married a dog.
Sweden has had it since 1963.
Not one single
no
dog
one
wedding.
ever turned up to City Hall with their fucking dog going,
Just never
hey,
happened.
right? I can do this, huh?
But that's the thing. With all those arguments, they'd be fine arguments if the thing hadn't been in place everywhere else without any of those things becoming problematic.
That's funny.
It just, it's such a, like, in some way you think Australia will be worse than Alabama was when, it got passed there. I mean, it's crazy. I will say this, that in Australia, this is a case of the politicians being desperately out of touch with the majority of the Australian population. The majority of the Australian population has, in pretty much every opinion poll for the last decade, supported same-sex or marriage equality. It's been very political, and the reason that it hasn't got through has mostly been about politics, but I hope that it's soon gonna... I mean, you know what the worst thing about it is? Even just as an Australian touring comedian internationally, I can't write... Like, you're like, oh, yeah, I'd like to write something about this. You know, it's a topical thing.
Everybody's like, hey, we decided that 10 years ago.
I can't
5
tour
years
this
ago.
material.
Yeah.
I can't be getting on stage in America going, anyway. So what if people would marry a dog? They're like, yeah, we did comedy about this 10 years ago when this was an actual issue.
Yeah. Well,
your bit has been made hacky by your country.
That's funny. My mom is a hardcore Christian Republican, and I remember talking to her about... My mom and dad had been divorced for like 30 years, and my mom's little dog, Pepper, is her life. She absolutely loves this little dog,
right.
Pepper. So I was talking to my mom. I said, Mom, you know, some conservative people are saying, what's next if we allow gay marriage? Are people going to marry their dogs? And my mom goes, I'd marry my dog.
I mean, some people would marry their dogs. It is the flaw in the argument, because we all know if it was allowed.
That dog.
Well, that's the thing. The problem is we argue against that slippery slope argument, but we also have to acknowledge if it were legal for people to marry their dogs, there would be some people who would marry their dogs.
Yeah. Hey, and I'm pretty fond of my toaster.
Yeah, I mean, well, that one's no harm, no foul. That's fine. Like, you can marry your toaster. I don't care.
It's a four-slicer.
I have no problem with those people who have that sexual kink that they're like, you know, people get married to a wall or like a whatever. If your brain is wired in a way that your sexual thing is that you feel like you're in love with a wall, then better it be that than like, you know, someone who can't consent or whatever. It's a wall. It doesn't really matter. Right. If you want to fucking marry your toaster, marry your toaster.
Well, as long as
I have no problem with that.
As long as people are thinking about love instead of, you know, hate and violence and terrorism.
Right.
That's a good thing.
Yeah. If you're like at home fucking your toaster rather than like, you know, getting on online forums about how much you hate women, then fine. Fuck your toaster.
Yeah.
I feel like that's fine. Don't plug it in would be my advice. Or maybe that's part of the thrill. Anyway, whatever. I don't know.
Well, but also it's really nice just to be in Australia and a country that's not on the verge of civil war.
Well, here's the thing. So I live in America half of my time, but this year I have not been back as much as I ordinarily would be. And are
you angry with us?
Well, no, you know what it is? I feel like you guys are having a debate about the very essence of what it means to be America, and that's just not my debate to be had.
Right.
Like, I want to live in America, but it's like America is like a couple who always fight when we go out now, and you guys need to sort your shit out.
Yeah.
And then I'll be happy to hang out with you guys again. But it's not going to be helped by me chipping in my 2 cents worth about what's going wrong. This is something you guys have to work out. This is America's battle about the soul of what it means to be an American, right?
Yeah.
And I think there are two very distinct groups in that country right now about, you know, that are very, very divided about what it means to be an American. And as someone who's not an American, who just wants to live in America amongst some Americans, that is not my battle to have. So I think I have kind of because that's also the area where I normally do my best comedy, is talking about what's going on in sort of, you know, my world and the broader world, right? So sometimes you're like, well, I can talk about what I think about Trump or America or what's going on, but this is your fight. This is for you guys to talk about. You guys have got to sort this out. I can't help it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, you seem to have a cozy setup here. And it's funny, you want to live in America. I want to live in Sydney.
Well, I mean, we could do a timeshare.
Maybe there you go. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah, that's all right.
Oh, man, you'd love my place for 6 months out of the year. That'd be perfect. I love it.
Actually, that's like something that comedians probably haven't looked into as much as they could. If you could genuinely split your schedules a little bit.
That's genius.
You know
why hasn't anybody thought of that?
Yeah, it's like you don't really need 2 solid careers yourself. What you need is like you need 2
one guy with a medium career and the other guy with a decently located
apartment. Yeah, that's all you need to bring to the table. One guy's got a great career. The other guy's got a conveniently located apartment. Together, they're unstoppable. All right. So what else do you do when you're in town? So what's your day like when you're when you're doing comedy in Sydney? What do you do? What like how do you fill your day?
Well, I'm perfectly located being in Newtown because, like, when I travel anywhere, my hobby that I like to do, I like to go to used bookstores and I like to go to used record stores.
Okay.
And so Newtown's got great
Both.
used bookstores.
Yep.
I like ethnic food. I've been doing that up and down Kings Road.
Is there a particular ethnicity that you would gravitate
Thai
towards?
is my favorite,
Okay, nice.
and then
Yep.
Indian. I like spicy. But so yesterday morning, I woke up early to go see the McGregor Mayweather fight.
Okay, yep.
So that was exciting. The guys who worked at the Comedy Store said they were going to go to the Vic on the Park. So I stroll over this classic Aussie, pub, and the place was packed with people, and I couldn't find my friends. So I had passed this other place called the Golden Barley Hotel, and I went in there and I watched it by myself. It was really exciting to be in like a room full of Australians and see. It was like half the people wanted McGregor, and then half the people were for Mayweather. And it was really exciting. And
Are you a person who is excited by fighting? Are you like an MMA or like a boxing fan in general, or just more about the spectacle of this particular event?
It's funny because I'm against violence, but I love boxing.
Yeah. What's agreed upon violence? Like, I mean, I think there's
I've
a
always
difference.
loved boxing. I tried to box when I was 13 for a
okay.
year
Yeah.
in junior gold gloves. Like the movie Rocky had come out, and like a lot of white guys in America got suckered on the movie Rocky. Me and my brother both like watched Rocky and looked at each other and thought, "Hey, we could be the next heavyweight champions of the world."
Mothers must have hated that movie.
So, and then I had one fight and came in second.
Okay.
So
Retired. One fight.
and I remember those Ali fights,
Uh-huh.
and in the '80s were incredible. Sugar Ray Leonard and Duran, and there were so many brilliant fighters. It's the boxing game has kind of waned in the last few years, but I was a real snob when UFC came out. I thought it was too animalistic and too violent, and. The thing when like a guy's down on the ground, another guy's got he's on his knees and his dick's in his face and he's punching him. Ha ha! I have my dick in your face and I'm punching you in the face. It just first time I saw UFC, I thought, are these the deleted scenes from Shawshank Redemption? It was just too violent, weird, homoerotic for me. So I was a real snob, and then I'm friends with Joe Rogan. And I play at the MGM in Vegas where they do the UFC championships. So he set me up on tickets 3 times. And it's like ancient Rome gladiatorial. Right. Before the TV signal goes out to the world, the arena goes black. The Who's Baba O'Reilly comes on. And to that song, they play this montage on all the screens of like the greatest UFC knockouts, and then the song gains momentum, and like 3/4 into the song, it starts going bam, bam, bam on the drums. So they cut this montage of knockouts to these fucking drum licks. And then by the time the song ends and the lights come on and they go to the live feed, you want blood.
Right.
It's absolute bloodthirsty ancient Rome gladiatorial shit. And it's exciting. There's an adrenaline to it. So I enjoy it. But the thing that I dislike about it, which you can see from the McGregor Mayweather fight, what happened, like he was complaining that they didn't let him go to the end where he was knocked out. Why didn't you let him knock me out on the ground? Because it's not an animal sport. When a man is being seriously injured, they stop it.
Right.
In UFC, and I've seen it tons, a fighter is down, he's been knocked out, and they let the other fighter get on top of him and do like this barrage, this finishing fury, which is pure brain damage
right.
for later in life.
Right.
And I've seen the women fighters.
probably not
I've
that
seen
much
it
later in
loads of
life.
fights. Somebody's down. They got blood coming out of their nose and their mouth, and they'll let the other fighter get like 5 solid cheap shots in on them, before they go, okay, that's it.
I mean, here's the thing that I would say is if I were looking outside the world, if I were looking outside America, as like an alien coming to life, and you look at where the world is now with the madman in charge, America, like the craziness of it. One of the examples you would use about the descent of the civilization would be the fact that like the biggest thing in the world is all these people like essentially doing Thunderdome, doing blood sports. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The biggest, most popular sport in the world is like a blood sport. Now, here's the thing. I don't like boxing and I don't like MMA, but I get it. I'm a sporting fan.
You like a spectacle.
Yeah, I like a spectacle.
Yeah.
And I was intrigued and I get the theater of it, and I get the fact that these people, despite our concerns and whatever, they've all chosen to do it. And look, you might not know. I mean, maybe you should have known if you played football that you get concussion. But, maybe they told you if you wear this helmet and whatever, you're going to be fine, right?
Well, we didn't know that smoking was bad until like the 80s.
Right.
But you knew in your fucking heart that it was bad. And
right.
You were taking
Literally
a chance.
in your heart, you knew it was bad.
Before
and
your
in your
government
lungs.
fucking had to tell you explicitly.
Yeah.
You knew.
Yeah, you knew. And it's just, I don't think there's anyone walking into MMA who does not know that is got to be detrimental for you. So I guess you know what you're signing up for. So there is a part of me that's like, well, if 2 people want to consent to do it, and a bunch of people want to watch it, then
and it is entertaining. And like I said, I've seen it live and loved it. But I was a real snob about it when it started because I was such a boxing enthusiast. So I've been converted. You're right. It is the end of civilization high water mark. But the thing that you need to remember, I've met a bunch of these fighters after the big MGM thing. Some of them are like 5'5". Some of a lot of them, they're really tiny. Like Mayweather was 149 pounds. McGregor was 153 pounds.
Right.
That's not a very large man. So you need to always remember that when you're somewhere out in public and some little punk is, you're thinking about getting lippy with somebody, that one of these guys could karate spin and, kick your jaw out of place.
Well, I mean, particularly when you look at someone like McGregor, who 3 years ago was like a, whatever he's like, but his mythology of McGregor from like the little I know about this was he came from nothing in a very short period of time, essentially, didn't he? Like he was a guy who before UFC didn't have a lot going on in his life. But so he's exactly the sort of guy who could have been at the local pub and you could have had a problem with. I imagine he's always had that
I've
big
never
mouth.
seen anybody. I go to Ireland once a year for 20 years. I've never seen anyone walk around like Conor McGregor
like that?
with the arms swingy and the fucking the ass out and chest in, which is really almost like balance-wise, almost impossible to do unless you're swinging your arms like that. That's the only way to stay up, to walk in that posture.
Yeah, this all has to work.
It's such an
in
arrogant,
perfect harmony, or it doesn't work.
I am just a street urchin thug. Walk.
I mean, yeah. The whole thing.
Ireland people are very funny and humble, and
Yeah, it's true. It's not. It's the.
I've never.
The braggadocio is not really traditionally Irish, is it?
You don't meet like a boastful asshole like that ever. So he's a unique person.
I would like to see a bit of that coming. Maybe there is in this world because I don't follow it close enough to know. But I would love if the next, because this one seemed about, boxing has to be about, you got Floyd Mayweather, Money Mayweather, the guy who owns, a strip club and spent every night at his strip club coming up to it.
What a classy guy.
Blah, blah, blah.
Did he build a children's hospital?
No. Build a strip club.
Fucking strip club.
That cost $100 to get in.
Wow.
$100 on the door just to get in. Anyway, it was there every night. And then Conor McGregor, this guy who, again, has built this reputation on how brash and confident that he is. Could you be like a diminutive, shy, humble type and just be really good at fighting and get to the top? I guess that's what I'm asking. Like, could the next...
Can you bring in a ticket gate like that without... I think you're right.
Do you need to have a big personality, or would it just be enough to be like...
Yeah, no, right. Too shy, polite fighters is not going to sell tickets.
Not that many tickets.
You're absolutely right.
Right.
What, you can have like a bunch of, Boy Scouts and their grandmothers ringside?
Right.
No.
No. They know their target
Pimps,
market.
Prostitutes, corporate CEOs. Who can own those? Who can afford those fucking seats? That's like, they're like 10 grand or something. Or you probably more. Rap moguls and,
Yeah. Basically,
I want the well-mannered fighter who's trained by his grandmother.
I mean, essentially, you are asking somebody to make a poor life choice, because no one who is making sensible life choices is dropping $100,000 to sit in the front row of like a fight. Doesn't matter who's fighting. Doesn't matter if God comes down and fights Muhammad in a fight. Like $100,000 from pretty much any normal person. It's not a rational decision, right? So they know their target market. They want people who don't make rational or good decisions. So they want a couple of role models who also exemplify not making rational or good decisions, so those people can identify, right?
Yeah.
That's who you want. You want a guy that a pimp or a hustler or a guy who's going to spend $10,000 of his honeymoon fund to go to Vegas is going to identify with.
I love it. It shows true.
All right,
I want to talk about...
Well, go on. What were you going to say?
The fight of the century.
Okay, yes.
December 26th, the day after Christmas, 1908.
1908.
Happened in Sydney, Australia, Rushcutters Bay. Jack Johnson became the first black heavyweight champion of the world. Most Australians don't even know this.
I mean, I didn't know that. And that's that's not even that far from here.
No white fighter would give a black fighter the title, a shot at the title. This is the color line. And Jack Johnson was coming up. Jack Johnson was from Galveston, Texas. Both of his parents were slaves, former slaves. He was born right after the end of the Civil War. So Jim Jeffries was the champ, and then he retired. He was this beloved fighter, like total badass. And some guy got the title, and then this guy from Canada, from Quebec, named Tommy Burns, was the champ. And to think about, how limited rights or travel black people could do, Jack Johnson followed this guy around the world and would sit ringside and taunt him, well, you should give me the title, give me a shot at the title. And Tommy Burns called him a million racial slurs. He followed him to Paris, all over the world, wherever he was fighting, and sat ringside. I think Sydney, he sat ringside also. And he was this well-dressed black man, and he gets this title shot. Tommy Burns chose some ridiculous amount of money. I would only fight him if I was offered this. This Australian promoter, Hugh McIntosh, put up the money for them to fight, and then no America arena would allow a black fighter to go for this. There was such staunch, embedded racism. And this Canadian guy, Tommy Burns, does it. The fight is on YouTube. There's a brilliant documentary called Unforgivable Blackness that you should watch. It's about Jack Johnson.
Right.
And so he won the title in 1908 in Sydney the day after Christmas. Everybody wanted the white boxer. And Jack Johnson just punishes this guy. And he keeps trying to fall down, and Jack Johnson's holding him up going, no, this is going to be a long day for you, because he had called him the N-word so many times and all this shit. And
plus he traveled around the world waiting for this moment.
Him like a cat and playing with a mouse.
Wow.
And it was probably the greatest fight of the century, and it happened in Sydney, Australia.
Well, somebody, surely, why have...
I'm sorry. I forgot the most important detail. So the big money back then, like now, was the film of the fight. Tommy Burns is getting his ass beat so bad, the Sydney police want to step in and stop it, the fight. They're in the 13th round, they're threatening to stop it. So in the 14th round, Jack Johnson is putting him away, and the Sydney police, not only, the Sydney police shut off the cameras. because they didn't want it recorded, a black man beating a white man. They shut off, and you see right as the guy's falling, the cameras get shut off. And apparently the Sydney police went on to the ring, supposedly, and ended the fight.
I mean, that's an amazing story. Like,
So you're having this argument about fucking statues now?
Right.
There should be a statue to Jack Johnson at Rushcutters Bay.
I mean, absolutely.
Where the old Sydney Stadium used to be.
Yeah, I mean, this is...
I just wanted to present that to your
amazing
to your
to me. I did not believe this podcast would end with a call for a new statue, but I think it has. That was amazing. That was really great. Hey, we should wind up because we're going to go back to back. We're going to record your podcast as well. So, that means that we should finish this one. And plus, I want to put this up. I'm going to put this up pretty much immediately so that people can make sure if they are in Sydney, Australia, that they come out and see your show at the Sydney Comedy Store.
September 2nd at 7:15, the show. 7:15. Kind of early.
So, but that's good. 7 o'clock. Saturday night, easy place to park. Go in there.
You can hang out with me after this show.
Exactly. Look at that. So there you go.
We not only saw a show, we made a friend.
Yeah, exactly. Right? It's nice to make a friend. I feel like you made a friend with the cab driver on the way over.
The guy totally loved me. He was from Istanbul.
Yeah.
I had like the deepest conversation with that guy.
I could tell when you got out of the cab. It was like he actually gave you it was like a real life Uber. You know how you have to rate the driver at the end? He rated you and he gave you 5 stars, but just to me because he was a cab driver. He was just like, you've got a good one here. So
I had a great talk with him.
Look, I say even cab drivers love him, guys. You should go out and see him do some stand-up comedy. If you are anywhere else in the world, of course, you can download his album. Hey, thanks for being part of the podcast. I really appreciate it. Do I have to plug anything from my end? Oh, what about the internet and stuff? Can people find you? Is there a best place?
TomRhodes.net. The new album is All Hail Laughter. And
the podcast. What's the podcast called?
My podcast is Tom Rhodes Radio Smart Camp.
So people can find that in all the usual places.
Everything. Go to TomRhodes.net and you'll
it's all
find
there.
it all.
See, look at you.
Yeah.
A website that actually helps people. Not all of our guests have that, including probably
I like your
myself.
Illustrations you have on yours. Those are great.
So James Fosdyke, who's this brilliant Australian artist, he's from Adelaide. He does all my art for all my shows now. Basically because I reached a peak with my looks. And since then, photos have done me no favors. So basically, it's just drawings from now on. So you have to imagine how much I've artificially inflated my good looks in the drawings to what you'll actually see there on the night. But we are doing 2 shows live at the Sydney Opera House, September 15 and September 16. Charlie, myself, and a whole bunch of guests will be on those shows. First show, I think, is pretty much sold out. There might be a couple of random tickets. Second show, still some tickets available, but come along to those. They're going to be absolutely huge. We will be at the LA Podcast Festival with a huge lineup as well. And you can check out all our podcasts at tofop.com. All right, nice one. We'll see you later. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Will.